This story stains the snow you're about to step into. In 1959, 9 experienced hikers died mysteriously in the Ural Mountains. Their tent was cut from inside. Some had radiation burns. Others had missing tongues. The official story doesn't make sense. What really happened that night? They set out as a winter expedition, students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by a methodical young engineer named Igor Dyatlov. Trained to Evdel, trucked to the logging road called 41st Settlement, then skis toward a mountain in the local Mansi called Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain. One of them, Yuri Yudin, turned back with aching joints and the kind of luck that looks like failure at the time. The remaining 9 pushed into higher wind and deeper drifts. Their diaries kept neat entries. Photos showed smiles chapped by cold, a stove assembly, a guitar, felt boots drying on poles pushed into the snow. By February 1st, they climbed the shoulder of Kholat Syakhl and misjudged the descent, ending up on a bitter, exposed slope instead of forest. Evening pulled down early. Snow hissed across their canvas shelter. They stitched the tent to the ground with ski poles, weighed corners with rucksacks, and cooked under a hanging pot while the stove glowed faintly. Outside, the gale rolled like a freight train across the ridge. No firewood up here, just wind and hard frost. They ate a simple meal, slices of pork fat, biscuits, a pinch of cocoa, wrote a few lines, adjusted boots. Their last photographs captured smiles turned tight by wind. Then sometime in the dark hours, something went wrong with a speed and a certainty that shattered their order. Search parties fanned out when they failed to return. On February 26th, the tent appeared as a pale wound in the drift, half collapsed, one side slit from within by hurried knives. Boots stood in a line where they had been tucked to warm. A bowl of oats had frozen into a puck. Footprints led away, visible in the packed crust, the tracks of people who stepped calmly at first, heels and toes distinct, many of them barefoot or in socks. The path dropped toward the tree line, the only place in that white emptiness where a flame could live. Under a large cedar tree, searchers saw the remains of a fire, a hiss of embers caught in the wind. Branches snapped high as if climbed in desperation. 2 bodies lay there, stripped to their underwear, skin tinged bluish-gray and hands scorched. Bark under their nails. Not far upslope, 3 more, Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin, were found spaced along the route back to the tent, faces turned toward the hill as if they had tried to return against the storm. Months later, when the thaw parted the snow's crust, searchers located a ravine further into the woods. 4 more bodies lay there under a shallow roof of snow, wrapped in scavenged clothing, a makeshift den dug into the hillside where they had tried to survive the night. The bodies in the tent told of panic without stampede. The canvas had been slashed open from the inside as if someone's hands were clumsy with cold or urgency. The food remained. An unfired rifle rested by a pack. A camera on a chest strap, frost-fogged lens, held the last daylight. The footprints that ran to the trees did not ripple in circles or scatter. They formed lines, a procession, as though the hikers obeyed some command or each other. Yet the trees held marks the wind could not explain. The pair at the cedar bore blackened fingers and burned shins, the kind of heat pattern you get while crouched too near a feeble flame. Their bodies showed bruises and scrapes. Branches, falls, a climbing flurry. One of them had bitten through his knuckle, blood frozen under teeth. The 3 on the slope had small injuries and frost hardening their hair. Rustam's skull showed a fracture that suggested a fall or a blow. His wool hat remained on his head, round with ice. The 4 in the ravine carried the sharpest violence. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, soft tissue in the mouth gone, lips shrunken back, her face carved by thaw and meltwater. Her ribs were broken inward in a clean arc without the tearing you'd expect at the surface. Alexander Kolovatov's neck was twisted, bones in alignment as if carefully set by someone, yet he lay dead with eyes frosted open. Thibault-Brignol's skull had a depression fracture, heavy and fatal. Zolotaryov's chest was crushed with force akin to a car crash, and yet his skin bore no flooded bruise. Their clothing had been swapped and layered, pieces taken from those who died earlier, warmth redistributed in a grim calculation. A few garments registered elevated radioactivity when tested, a fact noted as abnormal and filed away like a photograph slipped under a heavier book. The forest floor around the ravine smelled of wet bark and cold earth. Their shelter had been deliberate, branches trimmed, a trench cut. A woolen scarf stiff with rime lay half buried. Water slowly gnawed at the edge of their hideout as winter sagged toward spring. When daylight returned, it illuminated injuries that made the official language stutter. Compelling force, no third-party involvement, phrases that do not warm human skin or close a wound. Years have reshaped the theories like snow shaping a drift. The simplest version claims a slab avalanche, a wind-loaded cornice releasing and battering the tent. A slab could weigh a truck. A slab can pin a body and break ribs. A slab can push trained hikers to carve through canvas and flee lightless into the woods. But searchers saw the tent standing, partly collapsed, pitched on a grade too shallow for typical slides, and no debris fan lay below. Prints preserved by wind read calm instead of frantic. The mountain did not tell of a roaring wave of snow. It suggested something quieter, colder, a pressure you feel in the bones before you understand it. Another explanation reaches for katabatic winds, air dropping like stone off the ridge. Gale can flatten a tent, rip poles, drive people downslope to the trees. Infrasound, born of the storm's geometry, the Kármán vortex street, could induce panic, so the suggestion goes, tricking the brain into dread. The hikers were no strangers to hostile weather, and their path into the forest had a shape that looks planned. What pressure made trained students carve their way out into -30 wind? Military tests haunt the margins of the file. Parachute mines detonate above ground with a concussion that smashes chests without tearing skin. Orange lights in the sky appeared in the diaries of nearby villages. Photos from one camera show smudged orbs over a horizon. A rocket shedding fuel can paint clouds with strange blue. A secret test could bring aircraft to a forbidden range. Yet no blast crater sits near the tent, no scorch on trunks, and a scatter of blackened branches at the cedar matches a small fire, not an airburst. Radiation on clothing might trace to lab work or to thorium lantern mantles common then, a contamination that clings like dust. Those tidy explanations dry out the details until they crack. Other paths wend into folklore. The Mansi were protective of their land but historically not violent toward travelers. Their name for Dead Mountain describes game scarcity, not curses. A bear does not peel ribs inward like a vice. A yeti leaves tracks. These prints were human. Snow buries secrets. The thaw chews edges and makes mouths look torn where tissue has softened. But the emergency decision remains. Something drove 9 people into night, some half-dressed, some barefoot, toward trees black as teeth against a sky full of blown snow. Afterward, the investigation moved under a frost of silence. Files carried stamps that kept them out of reach. Witnesses spoke of peculiar matters and later recanted. Photographs went missing, then resurfaced. A prosecutor closed the case with language that felt pre-printed, an elemental force, unspecified. Pages rustled into archives. The mountain went on swallowing winter after winter. Families received boxes of belongings and stiff certificates. A violin bow, a spoon with a nickname carved on its handle, a felt boot. Time gives an incident like this the glaze of myth. Yet the details bite with real teeth. Canvas slit open in the night, frostbitten feet stepping in a clean line. A cedar tree stripped of branches far above arm's reach. A ravine shelter that was a narrow decision between dying immediately and dying later. The 9 had rhythm, discipline, laughter, and they had wilderness skill. They cooked and measured and sang and planned, and they reserved a little chocolate for a summit photo that never happened. I imagine the night on that slope as a pressure that gathers in the tent like a second atmosphere. A sound under the wind, low and wide, the smell of snow, dust, and nylon, the tin edge of a knife drawn against canvas. They move in 2s and 3s toward the forest, listening for each other's breath. They try the cedar, fighting for dry branches with numb fingers, fire that smokes more than it burns, sparks licking bare shins. The den in the ravine takes form out of weakness and stubbornness. Layers of clothing change shoulders as hearts slow. The story ends where the cedars thin and the snow fills tracks with drifting erasure. Evidence remains, and it resists the simple story meant to make paperwork easy. If you want easy, you keep the light on and look away. If you want the shape of the dark that touched them, you keep watching, because memory is the only shelter that grows warmer as more people stand inside it. Subscribe to uncover history's darkest mysteries, because this case is not unique, just sharp with detail that refuses to dull. New episodes walk into other winters, other rooms where paper gives a thin voice to the lost. Share this with the one friend who loves a map and a cold trail. The night they faced on the slope has brothers and cousins in deserts and on seas, in towns where streetlights blink out at the wrong time, in basements with wet concrete and a locked door you thought you could ignore. Let the mountain teach caution without superstition. Take your time with each scrap of evidence until your fingers ache. They were ordinary and careful, bright and young, and something made them move. Leave a comment with your own reading of the path through the trees and the force that pressed them outward. Return next week for another place where fog folds back and the ground remembers more than it should. Keep close and keep a living fire inside when the wind climbs down from the ridge.